Certainly. Here's a rewritten, clear, and professionally structured version of your original content, keeping the key facts intact while improving grammar, readability, and flow. Cold case solved. DNA links husband to 1988 murder of Deborah Atrops after 37 years. The cold case of Deborah Atrops, a woman found strangled in the trunk of her own car, has finally been solved through the use of advanced DNA testing and dedicated detective work. On December 1, 1988, Beaverton police responded to a report of a suspicious vehicle parked at the edge of a wooded construction site in Beaverton, Oregon. The abandoned car had no license plates, frosted windows, and an open driver's side window with the keys still inside. Inside the trunk, officers discovered the body of 30-year-old Deborah Atrops. Her blue coat and black heels were covered in mud, and the car showed signs of a struggle, with mud smeared on the hood, steering wheel, gearshift, and front right tire. Deborah had recently separated from her husband, Robert Elmer Atrops. The couple had married the year prior and shared a recently adopted infant daughter. However, the relationship had turned volatile, and friends reported witnessing signs of domestic abuse. Deborah had even expressed fear that Robert might kill her. She had started a new relationship and was preparing to file for divorce. From the beginning, investigators suspected Robert. Soil samples were collected from the car, the dump site, and Robert's residence. The medical examiner determined Deborah had died by manual strangulation. Despite these leads, the case eventually went cold. Investigators cleared others, including Deborah's new partner, as suspects, and no charges were filed. In 2020, the Washington County Sheriff's Office reopened the case. Cold case detective Kevin Winfield re-examined evidence and tracked down new witnesses. Forensic testing was conducted on Deborah's clothing and the 1988 soil samples. The breakthrough came when Robert's DNA was found on the coat Deborah wore when she died. Additionally, an FBI lab concluded that the mud found on her car matched mud from Robert's property. Investigators also discovered that Robert had previously sold roofing materials at construction sites near where Deborah's body was found. Detective Winfield interviewed Robert in 2022, and inconsistencies in his story further strengthened the case. On March 23, 2023, Robert Atrops was indicted by a grand jury and arrested for second-degree murder. During his April 2025 trial, Robert's defense team argued that the DNA evidence was misinterpreted, calling the forensic methods too complex for a jury to fully grasp. They claimed the presence of Robert's DNA on Deborah's coat was not unusual for a married couple. They also criticized law enforcement for not considering other suspects. Prosecutors, however, emphasized the credibility and experience of the forensic analysts and presented the totality of evidence pointing to Robert. On April 17, 2025, after a 3-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than a day before finding 70-year-old Robert Atrops guilty of murdering his wife in 1988. On May 20, 2025, Judge Oscar Garcia heard arguments regarding Robert's eligibility for parole. Sentencing is scheduled to resume in July. Unidentified man found in 2004 finally identified through genetic genealogy after nearly 2 decades of mystery. A man found unconscious on a Phoenix sidewalk in August 2004 has finally been identified thanks to the emerging field of investigative genetic genealogy. On August 17, 2004, a man passed away at St. Joseph's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. He had been found 8 days earlier lying unconscious on the sidewalk at 3rd Avenue and Madison Street. He carried no identification, and his cause of death was determined to be heat exposure. Despite efforts by the Phoenix Police Department to identify Jim, including fingerprinting and submitting DNA to the Combined DNA Index System (CODIS), his identity remained unknown, and the case went cold. In September 2024, the Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner sought help from the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College in Mahwah, New Jersey. The center partnered with Genealog, a research organization in Tucker, Georgia, to perform genome sequencing on a preserved blood stain from the man. Genealog then shared the extracted DNA data with Parabon Nanolabs for further analysis. Undergraduate students at Ramapo College participated in a workshop course to investigate the man's identity. Though the semester ended before they could to finish their work, the Genealogy Center staff continued the research. Just 1 day into the college's winter break, they identified 2 third cousins of the deceased man, which led to a likely identification. John Thielson. The information was forwarded to Kristen Eggers, senior medical legal investigator with the Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner, working alongside the Arizona Attorney General's Cold Case Unit. Eggers officially confirmed the man's identity in March 2025. John Thielson had been reported missing from Toledo, Ohio, by his brother on September 1, 2004. He had a history of mental health challenges and had told his sister around the same time that he had cleansed himself and intended to jump into a river. He was never heard from again until now. Kristen Eggers praised Ramapo College's work, stating Ramapo College has become a beacon of hope for individuals and families across the nation. Their tireless efforts have provided answers to countless families and demonstrate an unyielding dedication to the welfare of all people, regardless of their circumstances. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays also commended the breakthrough, adding, "With increased technology and the right kind of cooperative approach between law enforcement agencies, there is hope for the loved ones of countless missing persons." Justice for Nancy Noga. Conviction in 1999 cold case murder more than 25 years after the tragic murder of a New Jersey teenager. Justice has finally been served. Nancy Noga, a 17-year-old student at Sayreville War Memorial High School in New Jersey, vanished on January 7, 1999. She had just finished her shift at a part-time job at the rag shop in Old Bridge around 6 p.m. and was walking home a route that usually took just 15 minutes. But Nancy never made it home that night, and she was soon reported missing by her family. Additional details about her discovery, investigation, and trial would follow here, but they were cut off in your message. Feel free to provide more if you'd like that part completed. Justice for Nancy Noga. Conviction secured 25 years after brutal 1999 murder on January 7, 1999. 17-year-old Nancy Noga disappeared after leaving her part-time job at the rag shop in Old Bridge, New Jersey. She was expected to walk the short 15 route home to her family's apartment in Sayreville, but she never arrived. The Sayreville Police Department launched an immediate search effort, joined by K-9 units, helicopters, and widespread media coverage. On January 12, 1999, at approximately 8:57 a.m., Nancy's frozen body was discovered by a man walking his dog in a wooded area behind a strip mall on Ernston Road, not far from her home. The murder sent shockwaves through the quiet suburban community. Nancy was found fully clothed, wearing jeans, a sweater, and a purple Arizona brand jacket. An autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head, caused by a strike from a tree limb. Evidence also indicated she had been sexually assaulted, given Nancy's cautious nature. Investigators believed she may have known her attacker. Early in the investigation, police released a sketch of a man seen in the area around the time of the crime, but no leads materialized. The case eventually went cold. More than 2 decades later, in 2021, a breakthrough came when male DNA found on Nancy's body and underwear was matched to Bruce A. Szymanski, a then 26-year-old from South Amboy and Old Bridge, now residing in Barnegat, New Jersey. At the time of Nancy's murder, Szymanski's wife worked at a nearby Kmart, close to where Nancy worked. His identification was made possible through forensic evidence and advanced investigative genetic genealogy, led by the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon and Olabad. In August 2021, Szymanski was arrested near his home and charged with kidnapping, aggravated sexual assault, murder, and possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. Szymanski was tried in a 3-week trial in October 2024. He did not testify in his own defense. His attorney Jason Seidman urged jurors to question whether the state had truly proven its case, emphasizing that no eyewitnesses or physical evidence beyond the DNA tied Szymanski to the crime. Seedman argued, the state has based their entire case on one piece of evidence, DNA. They believe that the person who left that DNA is the same person who killed Nancy, but DNA alone doesn't prove guilt. Numerous people were excluded as suspects simply because their DNA wasn't present. That's not how investigations should be done. He also pointed out that Nancy may have been struck from the front, possibly just once, and that the attacker was believed to be left-handed while Szymanski is right-handed. However, Middlesex County Assistant Prosecutor Katie Mae McGee, head of the Major Crimes Section, firmly rejected those claims. She stated in court, on January 7, 1999, Bruce Szymanski kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered Nancy Noga. The DNA evidence is not circumstantial, it is a direct link to the perpetrator. Nancy deserves justice, and today we are able to give it to her. In October 2024, Bruce Szymanski was found guilty on all major charges related to Nancy's death. Prosecutor Nancy was left like trash. Justice finally delivered during closing arguments. Middlesex County Assistant Prosecutor Katie Mae McGee delivered a powerful statement to the jury. She described how 17-year-old Nancy Noga was brutally attacked, saying he took Nancy's bruised, bloody, and broken body and left her like a piece of trash in the woods, where she remained for 5 days until a man walking his dog discovered her frozen body. McGee emphasized that Nancy was taken to a dark, isolated wooded area far from her usual walking route home from work, an area no one would voluntarily enter unless fleeing from something. She argued that this was a crime of opportunity. No, the DNA was still inside her when her life was ended. There is also male DNA in her underwear and it's on the left side, just like how her body was found, lying on her left side. McGee told the jury, the source of that male DNA is Bruce Szymanski. No one else did this. This team investigated and fought for her for over 2 decades. McGee reminded jurors that Nancy's walking route would have taken her directly past the Kmart store where Szymanski's wife worked and where he often spent time. Nancy's tragic encounter with him, she said, was purely a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The physical evidence does not lie. If you are firmly convinced that Bruce Szymanski is the source of that DNA, then you must find him guilty. In October 2024, after a 3-week trial, Bruce Szymanski was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, aggravated sexual assault, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose. Defense attorney Jason Seidman later stated that Szymanski was disappointed by the verdict and planned to appeal on March 17, 2025. Superior Court Judge Joseph Paone sentenced the now 52-year-old Szymanski to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before eligibility for parole, an additional 20 years for kidnapping, to be served consecutively 15 years for aggravated sexual assault, additional time for possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, also consecutive. Despite the verdict, Szymanski maintains his innocence. In a 4-page letter posted to Facebook, he denied involvement in Nancy's death. "I did not kidnap, indecently assault, or slay Nancy Noga." He revealed that he was offered a 10-year plea deal potentially reducible to 5 years, but refused it, saying he couldn't accept guilt for a crime he didn't commit. He alleged violations of Department of Justice guidelines and how his DNA was obtained, and stated, "DNA does not make a person a perpetrator, nor does it prove kidnapping or sexual assault." The letter concluded by claiming the truth would eventually come out, stating Nancy deserved true justice but not at the expense of convicting an innocent person. One of Nancy's classmates recalled learning of her friend's death while still in school. "The news left a lasting impact. Nancy and I used to walk together to Kmart, but after she was killed I wouldn't walk alone or go out at night anymore." Another cold case nears closure. The 1972 murder of Phyllis Baylor. On the evening of July 7, 1972, 26-year-old Phyllis Baylor was traveling from Indianapolis to Bluffton, Indiana, to visit family. She was driving a borrowed car with her 3-year-old daughter. The pair never arrived. Tragically, Phyllis's body was later discovered in a ditch next to the road. She had been fatally harmed, while her young daughter was found nearby, but alone. For over 50 years, Phyllis's case remained unsolved. But now, thanks to advancements in forensic science and renewed investigative efforts, justice is finally within reach. More details on the resolution of the Phyllis Baylor case can be added if available. Phyllis Baylor cold case. New DNA technology sheds light on 1972 murder. In July 1972, 26-year-old Phyllis Baylor and her 3-year-old daughter were traveling from Indianapolis to Bluffton, Indiana, to visit Phyllis's parents. The pair never arrived, prompting her concerned family to contact police and report them missing. Phyllis's husband at the time, Richard Baylor, said he received a phone call the following morning from her father, informing him that Phyllis and their daughter Jody, who had not shown up as expected. Richard, who referred to Phyllis by her middle name, Jean, immediately began driving toward Bluffton to search for his wife and daughter. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Richard located their abandoned car along Interstate 69 in Grant County, Indiana, with the hood propped open. Roughly an hour later, a woman driving in nearby Allen County made a grim discovery. Phyllis's body and her 3-year-old daughter were found in a roadside ditch. Phyllis was deceased, but the child was miraculously unharmed. Both were transported to a local hospital, where Richard was reunited with his daughter and informed of his wife's tragic death at the time of the incident. Phyllis and Richard had been separated for about 3 months, and Richard quickly became a person of interest in the investigation. However, he was able to provide a credible alibi and was ultimately cleared of involvement. An autopsy revealed that Phyllis had been fatally shot and sexually assaulted. The Allen County Police Department, working in conjunction with the Indiana State Police, launched a comprehensive investigation. Over time, investigators were able to develop a partial DNA profile from evidence recovered from Phyllis's clothing. Authorities have not disclosed when the DNA profile was first created. That profile was later used to eliminate the original main suspect, marking a key turning point in the decades-long case. Additional updates or information about the DNA match or potential arrest can be included if provided. Phyllis Baylor cold case solved after 53 years through DNA match, though no suspect was arrested at the time of Phyllis Baylor's 1972 murder. The Indiana State Police cold case team never gave up. As DNA testing methods improved over the years, investigators revisited evidence collected from the scene. In 2024, more than 5 decades after the crime, they were able to develop a stronger DNA profile from samples found on Phyllis's clothing. That profile was submitted to Identifiers International, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. Working alongside cold case detectives, the team identified a suspect in early 2025, Fred Allen Linneman, who would have been 25 years old at the time of the murder. His DNA was a direct match for the evidence found on Phyllis's clothing. Investigators could not find any known connection between Linneman and Phyllis. Linneman had a lengthy criminal history, including a first-degree murder charge in 1985. However, he never stood trial for Phyllis's murder. That same year, Linneman himself was killed in Detroit during a violent dispute. He was beaten with a baseball bat and set on fire while still alive, his body dumped in a dumpster. Though deceased, Linneman would have been charged and prosecuted by the Allen County Prosecutor's Office had he been alive today. Sergeant Wesrell, later public information officer for the Indiana State Police, shared in a public statement, Phyllis Baylor never made it to Bluffton to visit her family. After years of questions, this family finally has answers about what happened to her. Phyllis's former husband, Richard Baylor, expressed mixed emotions upon learning the truth. "I was totally relieved that it was uncovered, and that we found out who the person was, but upset that he passed away," he said. "I wish Phyllis' parents and sister were still alive to get the closure they waited for. But I'm grateful our daughter, Jody, finally got an answer after over 5 decades. It was a blessing for her to finally know." Charlotte cold case from 1993 solved through advanced DNA technology. A 32-year-old cold case in Charlotte, North Carolina, has been solved thanks to advancements in forensic DNA testing. On December 25, 1993, Charlotte Mecklenburg police responded to a report of burglary and sexual assault in the early morning hours. The victim was taken to a hospital where an assault kit was collected. However, no suspects were identified at the time, and the case eventually went cold. In 2022, the CMPD Cold Case Unit reopened the case and submitted evidence to Bode Technology for advanced testing, using grant funding from the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative's sake. Bode analysts re-examined the decades-old kit and extracted a partial male DNA profile. That DNA was matched to Tony G. Leslie, who was already listed in the State Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. Detectives interviewed Leslie at the Scotland County Correctional Institution, where he is serving a 13-year sentence for several 2019 first-degree burglary convictions. Records show Leslie has received 7 prison infractions since then for assault and disobeying orders. Following the interview, a grand jury indicted Leslie for first-degree sexual assault and burglary. On March 17, 2025, the now 48-year-old Leslie pleaded guilty and received an additional 14-year prison sentence, to be served consecutively to his current term. The victim in the 1993 assault has been notified of the development's identity of 1981. John Doe revealed through fingerprint advances more than 40 years after a man's body was discovered floating in water in rural San Joaquin County, California. His identity has finally been confirmed. On the afternoon of July 13, 1981, sheriff's deputies responded to a report of a body in the water. The deceased individual, a black male, remained unidentified for decades and was referred to only as a John Doe. Thanks to recent advancements in fingerprint technology, forensic analysts were able to successfully reprocess old fingerprint records. In early 2025, the man was identified as Edward Donald Raymond. Additional details about his background or cause of death can be added as they become available. Identity of 1981 John Doe revealed as Edward Donald Raymond after 44 years on July 13, 1981. Deputies from the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office responded to a report of a body floating in the water near Blossom Road and Beaver Slough in Thornton, California, just north of Stockton along Interstate 5. When recovered, the man's body was already badly decomposed, and he was wearing only white swim shorts with red and blue stripes. A gunshot wound to the right shoulder was noted as the likely cause of death. One of the most distinctive identifiers was a tattoo on the left arm that read, "Black is beautiful." Despite this clue, the man remained unidentified for more than 4 decades, and the case eventually went cold on 2025. New advancements in fingerprint analysis technology enabled authorities to match old fingerprint records and finally identify the deceased as Edward Donald Raymond. Born February 21, 1947, he was 34 years old at the time of his death. A few days before his body was discovered, witnesses reported seeing a white or beige Cadillac in the area, with a driver who resembled Edward. However, no vehicle or additional clothing was ever recovered near the scene. Edward also used an alias Edward Wilson and listed a different date of birth, July 21, 1948. He was never reported missing, and the only known record tied to him was a 1976 arrest in San Francisco where he gave an Oakland address, though his identity is now known. The circumstances surrounding Edward's death remain a mystery. Authorities are asking anyone with information to contact the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office at 209-468-4400. Attention, Detective Richard Martin. 1995 Anderson County Cold Case of Richard Martin solved. After nearly 30 years, after nearly 3 decades, the mystery surrounding the 1995 death of 24-year-old Richard Martin in Anderson County, South Carolina, has finally been resolved. On the night of September 2, 1995, Richard was last seen leaving NY's bar on Highway 81. About 90 minutes later, he was discovered 2.5 miles away, badly beaten and barely conscious in the middle of Welcome Road, near Interstate 85. Richard was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he later succumbed to his injuries. An autopsy determined he had been attacked with a blackjack, a small weighted club designed to deliver blunt force trauma. From the outset, investigators received multiple tips pointing to a man named Bobby Milan, who had reportedly become jealous after seeing Richard dancing with a woman they both knew. Witnesses claimed Milan owned and carried a weapon similar to the one used in the assault over the years. Milan was interviewed several times, and detectives noted that he revealed specific details about the crime scene and Richard's injuries that were never made public information only someone directly involved would know. He later failed a polygraph test related to the case. Despite this, the case remained open for years. Milan died of cancer in 2010, before charges could be filed. In 2025, after a final review by the 10th Circuit Solicitor's Office, authorities concluded that probable cause existed to name Bobby Milan as the perpetrator. Though no trial will occur, officials said the evidence overwhelmingly supported his involvement in Richard's death. Richard's mother, Ada Martin, responded to the long-awaited resolution. "I have never used the word closure. Even if the people and animals involved in ending my son's life had been convicted in the first month, it would never close the hole in my heart or ease the ache that never goes away. This is not closure. This is only a conclusion to this part of Richard's story."